look at all like what we usually observe when people feel empathy for someone else's suffering. I explained that I had meditated on unconditional compassion, trying to feel a powerful feeling of love and kindness for people who are suffering, but also for all sentient beings. When I engaged in meditation on altruistic love and compassion, Tanya noted that the cerebral networks activated were very different. In particular, the network linked to negative emotions and distress was not activated during meditation in compassion, while certain cerebral areas traditionally associated with positive emotions, with a feeling of affiliation and maternal love, for instance, were. From this initial experiment was conceived the project to explain these differences in order to distinguish more clearly between empathic resonance for another's pain and compassion experienced for that suffering. We also knew that empathic resonance with pain can lead, when it is repeated many times, to emotional exhaustion and distress. It affects people who emotionally collapse when the worry, stress or pressure that they have to face in their professional lives affect them so much that they become unable to continue their activities. Burnout affects people confronted daily with others' sufferings, especially healthcare and social workers. In the United States, a study has shown that 60% of the medical profession suffers or has suffered from burnout, and that a third have been affected to the point of having to suspend their activities temporarily. Over the course of discussions with Tanya and her collaborators, we noted that compassion and altruistic love were associated with positive emotions. So we arrived at the idea that burnout was in fact a kind of empathy fatigue and not compassion fatigue. The latter, in fact, far from leading to distress and discouragement, reinforces our strength of mind, our inner balance, and our courageous, loving determination to help those who suffer. In essence, from our point of view, love and compassion do not get exhausted and do not make us weary or worry or worn out, but on the contrary, help us to surmount fatigue and rectify it when it occurs. And here comes this idea of hope. When a Buddhist meditator trains in compassion, she or he begins by reflecting on the sufferings that afflict living beings and on the causes of these sufferings. To do this, the meditator imagines these different forms of distress as realistically as possible until they become unbearable. This empathic approach has the aim of engendering a profound aspiration to remedy these sufferings. But since this simple desire is not enough, one must cultivate the determination to put everything to work to relieve them. The meditator is led to reflect on the profound causes of suffering, such as ignorance, which distorts our perception of reality, or the mental poisons, which are hatred, attachment, desire, jealousy, which constantly engender more suffering. The process then leads to an increased readiness and desire to act for the good of others. These three dimensions, love of the other, empathy, which is a resonance with other sufferings, and compassion, are naturally linked. When altruistic love encounters suffering, it manifests as compassion. The transformation is triggered by empathy, which alerts us to the fact that the other is suffering. One may say that when altruistic love passes through the prism of empathy, it becomes compassion. So it was clear, from my perspective, that if there was an empathy fatigue leading to the syndrome of emotional exhaustion, there was no fatigue of love and compassion. Empathy is indeed needed to trigger the arising of compassion, but the space of that compassion should be vast enough so that empathy does not turn into uncontainable distress. Without the support of love and compassion, empathy left to itself is like an electric pump through which no water circulates. it will quickly overheat and burn. So empathy should not take place. Empathy should take place within the much vaster space of altruistic love. It is also important to consider the cognitive aspect of compassion. In other words, understanding the different levels of suffering and its manifest or latent causes. We will be able thus to place ourselves in the service of others by helping them effectively while still preserving our inner strength, our kindness and our inner peace. As the French psychologist Christophe André writes, so he's quoting the psychologist here, we need the gentleness and strength of compassion. The more lucid we are about the world, the more we accept seeing it as it really is, the easier it is to accept that we cannot face all the suffering that is encountered in the course of our lives unless we have this strength and this gentleness. So I think that's very relevant in the modern world. Yep.
Okay, after that, it's really interesting, but I'm not sure that I know how to do it. My grandma is in the hospital. She's between life and death. Yes. And when I visit her, I feel this pain in my heart. And I have no idea how can we help in this situation. She's suffering. She's barely she's barely awake. Like she's there, but she's confused. She doesn't know who I am.
So, of course, using wisdom and compassion, we would just try to help support that person in whatever way we can to help them to.
But where there is no hope. She's 93. Like. Okay.
Yeah, but we're not saying hope that somehow you wave your magic wand and everything will be fine and she'll be healthy again. No, we're not saying that at all. So that's what I mean. He's saying we need to see reality as it is. And of course, as long as we have this worldview that the source of suffering is the outside, then of course there will be no hope. There will be no hope. Of course. And that's why we lead to burnout.
So I don't understand how from empathy to compassion, like I thought the compassion is actually empathy from what you read, like to really see her suffering, to understand what she's going through, and I almost feel it myself.
Right, but again, empathy, as we saw in the article, by understanding reality and seeing what's suffering and the cause of suffering, then there's hope, we can help. Can we wave a magic wand and dispel people's suffering? No. But we can help by helping people to overcome the mental afflictions. I mean, maybe she's got fear and anxiety and try to help reduce that. That would be useful, no? Wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I can barely communicate with her.
Right. Okay, but I mean, again, we can do what we can. We can be there and comfort her and support her and to reduce her suffering. But if we think that suffering's coming outside, then of course we're not some magic person that can wave a magic wand and dispel her physical suffering. I mean, that's what happens. That's why we end up with burnout. Because people go out there and see that they can't wave a magic wand and dispel people's physical suffering.
In this case, I don't think I can.
So again, but you can't change one, but you can be a positive effect on someone. You can help people in whatever level we can manage. Now there seems like we can do nothing. But actually, if a person is suffering physically, then often a lot of the suffering they experience is because of fear, anxiety, all of these things. So then if we have trained in these sort of things, we have some tools to help them to at least reduce their fear, anxiety and so forth. And that will alleviate a lot of their suffering. A lot of their suffering. Like, for example...
maybe compassion to yourself.
Well, as well, yeah. But like an example, some years ago, I was doing a course in Dharamsala, and there was a young lady in the course, and I think when she was very young, early teenage years, she had a problem with her neck, and they had to fuse some vertebrae together surgically, and because of that she had restricted movement, and so from that time she was worried that that was going to cause a problem in her life, so she suffered a lot of pain in her neck because of that. And then she came to the course, and this was already, I think, 10 years later, 8 or 10 years later, and she said she's been in constant pain since the surgery. And she came to the course, and we talked a little bit about mindfulness and just observing on about day 3 of the course. And then she came to see me at the end of the course, and she said since day 3, she's had no pain in her neck for the first time since the surgery. Why? Because she was accepting. She wasn't doing this. I mean, of course, there was still some restricted movement, but she's really said since 8 years since the surgery, first time she's not had any pain in her neck. Can she wave a magic wand and fix the vertebrae? No, but we can maybe change people's mental state. And that's really going to be the big impact on people's suffering. So in that sense, if people have a lot of suffering, we can begin to do that.
I thought about like when my grandmother had Alzheimer's before she died, and I learned how to draw legs. For me, that was very helpful because even though I knew there was nothing I could do for her, when I did draw legs, I felt I'm doing something, and that made me feel in a way better.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, you wish for someone to really strongly to have happiness and take away suffering. Maybe in some way that would affect, but for me, it felt at least I did something. I mean, even when you go to Glen, you see all these poor people in the street. I don't have enough money to give to everyone, but I can wish for them, and aspire to become a better person. Use it as a motivation for myself, so that I can be the best version of myself I can, so I can maybe benefit a little bit more. And I think, when we're talking about those things, that's something that I found helpful. But
Okay, let's go to the empathetic joy now. So, empathetic joy is really a focusing on the positive aspects of ourselves and others. And this is something very important in the modern world. Because in the modern world, we're pretty well always focusing on the negative, and we see this in the media everywhere. And we end up with this really distorted view of things. And of course, not only do we focus on the negative, we tend to do that with cognitive fusion to make it even more biased. So here, empathetic joy is a rejoicing in our own and others' virtues and good fortune. And also this is very helpful to overcome jealousy, because generally if we see someone else has something good happen to them, we often become very jealous of them. So instead of having that jealousy, we can be happy for them, we can rejoice for them. So what I'd like to do now, before we go on to talk about a little bit about equanimity, is do a meditation on empathetic joy, a rejoicing in our own and others' virtues and good fortune. So let's do that practice, and then we'll move on to equanimity. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Simply becoming aware of the rhythm of the breath. Empathetic joy is a rejoicing in our own and others' virtues and good fortune. So first bring to mind a person who you know well, who radiates joy and well-being. And as you focus on this person's joy, open your heart to that joy and take delight in it. And now think of someone for whom something wonderful has happened recently. And then recall the delight of that person and share in their joy. now direct your attention to someone who inspires you with their virtues. Virtues such as generosity, kindness, and wisdom. And rejoice in these virtues and everyone who are recipients of this virtue. Now direct your attention back along the timeline of your life to your earliest childhood memories. And try to recall the earliest kindness that you can remember experiencing from another person. Take delight in this other person's kindness that they have shown you. And now move slowly along the timeline of your life from this earliest memory through your childhood years, adolescent years, adult years, right up to the present day. And recall all the people who were kind to you, helped you and supported you in your life. Family members, friends, teachers, colleagues, and also those who have inspired you from afar. And as you breathe out your delight and your gratitude that people have shown you such kindness, that they've brought such kindness to the world. And slowly coming to the present moment. And rejoicing in the fact that you've had the freedom and opportunity to come here to this retreat. And having the desire to want to improve and develop yourself. And then finally, rejoicing and feeling immense gratitude for the staff here and also all the Dharma Friends volunteers who, without whose help, this retreat would not have been possible. And just rest in that gratitude and joy.